Hello and welcome to Piano Shack, actually For Sound with me, Woody. For Sound is a very big music retailer in Scandinavia, and this is the Fridhemsplan store in central Stockholm. It's about an hour before the concert is due to start, so let's go inside and take a look at the rig. This tour is sponsored by Roland, so Kebu has replaced his other brands we will not mention, vintage synths, with modern Roland gear. He's kept his vintage Roland gear, such as the Juno 60, which is absolutely gorgeous and a real pleasure to see. There's also the JX8P, his two Alpha Junos, and hidden in the back behind the keyboards there is a MIDI modded TR-808 analog drum machine. I didn't realise it was there, so I didn't capture any shots of it. So apparently Kebu had just a few days to program the sounds from his Korg and Moog synths into the brand new JD XAs and the System 8s. He's using 2 or maybe 3 XAs, I didn't count, and he'll be using the analog and the virtual analog sound engines. And then he's got 2 System 8s, one of which is using the System 8 sound mode, and the other, I believe, is running the Juno 106 plug-out. As far as I could tell, the only non-Roland gear was his Akai MPC, the mixing desk and some stuff in the rack, but I didn't really dig around there too much. For drums, he's using the TR-8, and after the gig he said that he wasn't really digging the tom sounds as much as his original gear, and we joked around a bit about how that must have ruined the entire concert for the audience. There's also a couple of boutique synths, but not the DO5. We had a bit of a laugh about that because it had become quite a thing on both of our channels, but I guess he didn't have time to incorporate it into his set. He told me that he put the new Roland synths in exactly the same location in the rig as the vintage synths that they were replacing. But it did take him a while to get used to the 4-octave keyboards compared to the originals, which had a 5-octave keyboard. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what the RD2000 was being used for. My guess is it's probably just there for show. You might be wondering why there are so many different synthesizers in his rig. Well, this actually came up as a question in the Q&A after the gig. Well, he needs a lot of keyboards because each one is playing just one track of the arrangement. There is no soft synths running here, no PC or anything. And these synths are not multi-timbral either, so you do need one synth per track. Although you could use the same type of synth for all the sounds, Kebu feels that mixing becomes more difficult when using the same synth for many tracks. By using different synths for each part, it becomes easier to fit them together into a mix, and it sounds less samey. Sameness was the word he used. And I need to think about that because I tend to use the same VST for all tracks in my arrangements. So the sequencing is handled by the MPC, and there might be up to 20 tracks playing, and Kebu plays as many parts live as his 2 hands allow. But it would have been too much work for him, and he didn't have enough notice to transfer all of the sequencing parts to a Roland sequencer. If there is such a thing nowadays, I'm not sure. So Roland let him keep the Akai. So the reason I was invited was to do an interview with Kebu and a tour of his rig, which I was going to upload to my channel. But unfortunately, he had other business to attend to. I went to get a haircut. When I came back, he'd gone back to his hotel to freshen up, rest and get some nourishment. What a complete diva! I'm just kidding, Kebu. He's actually the nicest bloke you could ever meet. So I can give you an example actually. When he was away, I asked Roland if I could jam a little bit on his rig because they were doing the same thing when they were doing the sound check. So I played a few notes on his JX8P, and with the delay effect it sounded exactly like his signature sound used on many of his tracks. So I was actually trying to remember the chords to one of his songs exactly at the moment when he returned from the hotel. Yeah, exactly. When I was massacring 2 Jupiter and Beyond on his cherished vintage synths, he appeared, and oh dear, this could have been pretty awkward, but Kebu was really cool about it, super chilled, and just laughed it off. So a small team of guys from Roland Scandinavia were prepping the rig here. So a big shout out to Renee, Ludwig and Gustav, who are rigging up here and getting things ready for the show, and also preparing for the live stream, which you can see on 4Sound's Facebook page. And these guys were totally cool and really into what they were doing. The cameras and video mixing setup was really high-end and pretty complicated. I didn't understand much of it, but it had some pretty serious cameras, and on the roof was a super cool 360 camera. The whole event would be live streamed on Facebook, and this was making the guys really nervous, as the only decent upload speed they could achieve was from a tethered mobile phone with 4G. And remember, we are in a basement here. Unfortunately, there just wasn't time to film any interview or rig rundown footage before the gig. But off camera, I did spend quite a while chatting with him and the Roland guys that were setting it up. Plus, there was a Q&A session at the end, so I did get some interesting nuggets of info that I'll share with you later in this video. So here come the small but very enthusiastic crowd, filing in through the doors, coming down to the basement at 7 o'clock. So I'll share with you now some moments that I shot in the concert. I used the Zoom H1 to capture the audio, but it let me down a bit here. Despite me having really good levels, the audio came out boomy and a bit muffled. I did EQ it a little bit in post as best I could, but it's still not great, so bear with me there. It did sound good in the location though, through this Bose PA. So after the gig, there was a really interesting Q&A between Kebu and the audience. This went on in Swedish, but maybe I can add some value here by translating and sharing with you some of the really interesting things that came up. He's playing back very rigid, structured sequences from the Akai, and it doesn't really allow for any flexibility there or improvisation. It's not like Ableton Live, is it? But he does improvise as much as he can on the played parts that he's doing himself. He changes patches and changes voices and so on. He did say that he would like to work on making the performances more dynamic in the future. Someone asked how long it takes him to do an arrangement, and he said he does it on his PC in Cubase, and it usually takes about a week or two per song, depending on if it's a cover or an original track. The originals take a bit longer. And then he transfers the MIDI over to the MPC, which is used for live use. It's more reliable, I guess, and it has multiple MIDI outputs. Kebu did say that an advantage of the old MIDI hardware sequences is that the timing is so much tighter than on modern USB MIDI devices. He mentioned that the MIDI kit for the Juno 60 has really bad timing as well, due to the old age of some of the electronic components. The audience were curious how long it took him to set up the gear. He said it was about 4 hours to rig everything up and 1.5 hours to tear down, but a little bit quicker if he's got help from people to load in and load out the gear. He recently performed a Giorgio Moroder cover for the man himself, which was a real honour. I was surprised to hear that he hadn't listened to 80s synth pop very much, like Howard Jones, although he did know of him. His influences were more Jean-Michel Jarre, Hans Zimmer, some other film composers, I think he said, and more recently EDM and trance music in particular. Nowadays, he listens a lot to choral music and sings in a choir. He prefers an expression pedal to aftertouch as it gives greater control, and usually he uses it to open the filter and add vibrato at the same time. He demonstrated this and it did sound really effective. I'm going to steal that idea myself. When asked if he was doing this full time now, he replied yes, since January. Got a big round of applause for that. And it all started on YouTube when he uploaded a demonstration of his D50. After the audience had left, they asked me if I wanted to do some filming with Kebu, but I know how it feels at the end of a long day. After the gig, you're tired, you just want to tear down the rig, close up the store and go get some grub, a beer and crash out. I didn't want to be that annoying YouTube guy, so I said let's skip it this time. I'm connected with Kebu now, so let's meet up again when he's next in Stockholm and I'll film his complete vintage rig, which I think some of you will appreciate even more. By the way, thank you to everybody who recognised me and came up to say hello. It felt really special to meet you face to face and hear how much you enjoyed the channel. It was a pleasure to meet you all. Now, I understand if you might think that this video comes across as an ad or some promotion for Roland, but honestly, you'd be very, very wrong. It's not. It's simply me wanting to share a memorable evening spent listening to a super talented performer, playing great music, and hanging out with some super cool and passionate fellow synth enthusiasts. That's what it's all about. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again soon. Cheerio.